Welcome to Mitzvah Expo, the Jewish community organization showcase hosted by Rabbi Cantor Dr. Bernstein.
Shalom and welcome to Mitzvah Expo, a new podcast and website showcasing the organizations and initiatives that enhance Jewish life, fight injustice, support Israel, strengthen our ties to the broader community, and more. I'm Rabbi Linda. Our goal is simple. We want you to get informed and be inspired by the work these valuable Jewish organizations do on our behalf every day. Alongside this podcast, our website at mitzvahexpo.org serves as a companion hub. There you'll find a showcase page for every organization featured on the program, with more information about their work and ways to connect with them. Today, our Mitzvah Expo featured organization is the Union for Reform Judaism. I am pleased to welcome Rabbi Esther L. Lederman, URJ Vice President, Jewish Life and Leadership. Rabbi Lederman oversees efforts to strengthen Jewish community, leadership development, and congregational innovation across the Reform movement. An ordained rabbi and longtime movement leader, she has helped congregations adapt to changing Jewish life through new models of engagement, community building, and leadership. The Union for Reform Judaism strengthens and connects Reform Jewish life across North America. Serving more than 800 congregations and nearly 2 million people, the URJ supports congregations, camps, youth and teen programs, Jewish learning, Israel engagement, leadership development, work to build communities of belonging, and justice efforts through the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism. Together with their communities and partners, the URJ helps people find meaning, belonging, joy, justice, and purpose through Reform Jewish values and teachings. The URJ's top priority is helping more people find meaningful entry points into Jewish life and supporting them as they move from initial connection to deeper belonging and leadership. This includes civic engagement through initiatives like Every Voice, Every Vote, immersive youth experiences in URJ camps and programs like Letakein and Yala Yisrael, and ongoing work around Israel, democracy, and religious pluralism. Across all of this, the through line is building leadership and community, helping people see themselves in Reform Judaism and actively shape its future. Welcome to Mitzvah Expo. I'm Rabbi Linda Bernstein, and we are very fortunate today to be featuring the Union for Reform Judaism. And to represent this wonderful organization, we have Rabbi Esther Lederman, who's the Vice President of Jewish Life and Leadership. Rabbi Lederman, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Wonderful. So tell me what you do as Vice President of Jewish Life and Leadership and kind of what's your history with the organization.
Sure. This is a new role. So just beginning, I've been at the organization twice in my life. I actually got my start before rabbinical school, actually at the UAHC, which was our precursor about 25 years ago. But more recently, the last 11 and a half years, I've worked in the URJ, really working at the intersection of innovation and what was. So a big part of the work that I do as the Vice President of Jewish Life and Leadership is focusing on both how do we create the kind of North American Jewish life that is imbued with Reform Jewish values, using some of the mechanisms that we are most known for, our congregations, new communities, camps, youth leadership, adult leadership, and bringing people together in moments of belonging. So there's many things that sort of fit under my umbrella. Really with a forward-looking vision of what do we need to build for now, but also what do we need to set up for the future. One of my stock phrases is, how can we be good ancestors for the future? And so that also, I think a lot about that in this regard.
That's an important way to think about it because we do want to set things forward for our next generation and so forth. So maybe we'll take it a step back and also ask about what is the Union for Reform Judaism, in case anyone's not familiar with the organization. What's its core mission and how has it kind of evolved?
Sure, happy to answer that. I mean, to describe what we are, and sort of put your arms around this, we represent just over 800 plus congregations in the United States and Canada, and almost 2 million people. We essentially are the largest movement of Jewish individuals in the US and Canada. And part of that work is supporting congregations, camps, youth programs, justice work, Israel engagement, and Jewish communities. Our mission is to create, support, connect, and inspire diverse Jewish communities where everyone can find meaning, acceptance, belonging, joy, justice, and purpose through those Reform Jewish values.
Have you always been the number one in terms of
Oh,
the numbers of congregations, or has that kind of evolved over time? Because
oh,
I'm a bit more familiar with the
yes,
conservative
yes.
denomination, and I know that there have been kind of diminishing, and it seems like the reform movement has been increasing.
Yeah.
Is that a true
Well, no,
observation?
it's definitely evolved over time. I mean, the
Hmm.
URJ, originally it was called the Union for American Hebrew Congregations. It was founded in 1873, so it's been around about 153 years, and it was founded actually after already some Reform congregations already existed. So there are Reform congregations in the United States and Canada that are older than the Union for Reform Judaism. So it's definitely, listen, we are an evolving movement. It's actually one of our core values when we talk about the values of the reform movement. So we for sure have evolved over the years in terms of highs and lows. We certainly have had numbers that have been larger in terms of the number of congregations we've had. Um, and I don't like to be a prognosticator or a prophet about like which way we're going in. There have obviously been moments of growth, and there have been moments of contraction. I would say COVID was an accelerant of some contractions on one hand and some growth in others. So, what do I mean by an accelerant around contraction? So, in some parts of the country, we definitely saw places where congregations have either gotten smaller or there have been so many congregations. Parts of the country where there's, a reform congregation every mile or so. Do you need that many congregations? Some could argue no, some would argue yes, depending on the sort of the aesthetic or the brand of that particular form of Reform Judaism. So in some cases, we saw congregations merge or close, but in other parts of the country, we've seen congregations blossom and grow, either because they're in certain hotspots in the United States where there is a growing number of Jews and Jewish families moving into those neighborhoods. Somewhat, maybe they were leaving parts of New York and moving to Florida, or moving to other parts of the country where it was more affordable to live. And so in other parts, we've seen significant growth. Um, I'll just tell you one story, I think that highlights, or one visual that I think highlights the evolution of Reform Judaism, but also where our growth is coming from. Every year we run a conference for congregational presidents from our 800 so congregations. Congregations or presidents, transition every couple of years. So we have about 100 people at these conferences. And every Shabbat, we honor those presidents with 3 aliyot. And we say the first aliyah is for those of you who grew up in the movement and loved it. The second aliyah is for those of you who grew up in the movement and didn't love it. Kind of by 13 or 14, we're like, I'm never coming back here. And the third aliyah is for those who are new to the movement, those who either grew up in a different movement, grew up not Jewish at all, but came to it. And historically, we've been running this conference for about 26 years now. That aliyah is always the largest. So the Aliyah, the greatest number of Reform presidents are coming from either came to Reform Judaism as adults, whether they grew up Orthodox, conservative, Reconstructionist, secular, or found Judaism as an adult. And to me, that's the sort of secret sauce of what we have going for us is people are drawn to what we're doing as adults. And so in that way, I only see growth. But it's like the men who are touching the elephant. They only can see one part of their story because they can only touch their part. I think we have all kinds.
So it's hard to predict which direction it's going to be going forward. Like, is it going to be
Yes,
sort of steady? Is it going to go up or down?
right.
And
Exactly. And I think I think there's a lot of people who say to me, I don't have a lot of faith in the future of denominations. And I understand where they're coming from. Like that's not necessarily the future. I also say to them, and I see an argument for that. I could also say, when I think about the values that are attracting Jews today, I think many of them are the values that we are trying to live out in Reform Judaism. So whether or not, in 100 years, when I'm long gone off this planet and my children are raising my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren, will there be denominations? I'm not sure. But what I can tell you is I think the values that this movement is trying to espouse and trying to grow people in, I think those values are here for the eternal future. And whether we organize ourselves around those values, I think I hope we do organize ourselves around these values because I think they're very important. But so that's what I'd say on that piece.
So in terms of the values,
Yes.
maybe you could just tell us what some of those values are for the Reform
Yes.
movement.
I'm happy to. And these you can find, for your listeners who may want to do a little bit more research, happy for them to go onto our website where they can see language that talks about these values.
And you want to tell us the website?
Yeah, urj.org.
Okay,
Pretty
great.
simple, unionforreformjudaism.org. So we have 6 key values that inform, and we hold up our programming and we hold up our what we do against these values. So shared humanity, Israel and Jewish peoplehood, justice, belonging, learning, and evolving. And I think, and I think embedded in all of those values are more that could grow, but we really wanted to get to the root values of what a holistic, whole Jewish community looks like. And, I would say that Israel and Jewish peoplehood, along with shared humanity, is, for example, I can't live without one or the other. I can't be in a Jewish community that's only about Israel and Jewish peoplehood, and nor can I only be in a Jewish community that only cares about shared humanity. So that's an example, I think, of how we take certain values and let them live alongside each other, even if sometimes they're in tension with one another.
When you say shared humanity, are you talking about like life cycle events where we all share in a particular, whether it's a birth or a death or whatever, or is it some other definition in your mind for that?
I think it's yes and to sort of borrow that language from the improv space. I think it's everything from the experience of when I was a rabbi in my congregation at Temple Micah. So before I was at the URJ, I was an assistant rabbi at Temple Micah in Washington, D.C. And we were having a lot of conversations about how to make the B'nai Mitzvah experience just as meaningful for the non-Jewish parent. We have a lot of interfaith families. So we didn't feel that we wanted those parents to be on the bima, but it did not feel right for them to recite the same blessing as the Jewish parent because they have not necessarily, they maybe have chosen to raise their children as Jews, they themselves. So rather than asking them to say something that felt false, we wrote a different blessing and invited them to say it in English, or if they wanted to say it in the transliterated Hebrew, they could. But that's one example, I think, of what we mean by shared humanity. I think there are other things we also mean by shared humanity. To me, the things that come most to mind, here we are sitting maybe a couple of weeks after the terrible shooting at the mosque in San Diego. Unfortunately, violence against religious minorities in this country is something we are very familiar with, having been on the receiving end of anti-Semitic attacks in Poway, in Pittsburgh, in Washington, D.C. It's a recognition that being true to who we are as Jews doesn't mean we turned a blind eye when fellow, I would argue, brothers and sisters in minority religions are also harmed in this country, that we also, there's love for them too. And a recognition that at the end of the day, there might be disagreements over certain things. We might call our God Adonai and someone else might call their God Allah. Doesn't mean that there isn't something that we all share as human beings.
What do you feel that the Reform movement is doing a great job of right now? And what are some things that you'd like to see maybe do better?
Oh, I love that question. What do I think we're doing well? I want to focus on 3 components, our congregations, our camps, and I would say are the spaces that we play around justice and anti-Semitism. So our congregations and our camps are the crown jewels of our movement. Although not every congregation is thriving the way we want them to thrive, I think there's incredible congregations, and I'm not going to name any of them because then they're like, they have to be all of our favorite children. All 800 are our favorite children. it's amazing to walk into some of these congregations and to see transformation happen, to see amazing ritual moments, to see powerful sermons, to see community being built. And I think we're doing that really well. And I will say this, and I think every congregation could do better. The ones that are doing really great, the ones that are being challenged right now, I think there's always room for improvement. Like I believe that if we're not learning, we're dying. And so I think any congregation has a place in terms of learning. I think our camps are doing incredible things. We run 14 summer camps in Canada and the United States. Most of them residential camps for 3-4 weeks. We have a couple of specialty camps that focus on sports, arts, and science. We do amazing work with these kids. Who come from as little as 8 to as old as 15, 16. We have Israelis coming over from Israel, both as shlichim, so they work as counselors, but we also have kids, Israeli kids, who come over also. This started after October 7th. So I think the incredible work we are doing in camps is bringing joy and wholeness and belonging to thousands and thousands of kids, but also to the adults who serve in those communities. Again, we could always improve everywhere. And then I'd say the third place is what we are doing in the justice space, whether it's our Every Voice, Every Vote campaign, which we've been running every year. There are elections, and every year there are elections, even if maybe you can't vote in your particular election. But what does it mean in a nonpartisan way to say that every citizen in this country has a vote and a voice? And how do we make sure that those in particular who struggle more to get access to the vote, either because of circumstances of where they live, whatever the reason may be, encouraging as many and getting as many people out there to vote. And I think that's one piece of our justice work. We do a lot of justice space in the Israel-Palestine space. We do it in interfaith relationships, particularly when fighting against anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and other types of discrimination that people feel in this country. So I think those are all things we're doing really, really well. What could we do better?
One quick question on the voting. So are you trying to get out the vote for your constituents or the communities where your synagogues are located?
Everywhere. So we do a whole postcarding campaign. We partner with a number of different organizations across states. Our Canadian friends obviously don't participate in this point. They have their own, get out the vote. But we are trying to get both our own community, but we know that our own community, partially because of socioeconomics, partially because of where we live, partially because many of us are white majority, access to voting is fairly easy. So the other thing that we do is try and also make sure that folks who are typically not consistent voters, people who may be in areas where access to voting is harder because the rules around polling stations are harder, or those states have made more barriers. I mean, we're living in a time where there have been more obstacles to voting than we've ever seen since the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. It's really important that we try and get everybody out to vote. So it's not just people in our own communities. When I'm doing my postcarding, when I volunteer for this campaign, some of the people I'm writing to are in Mississippi or Louisiana or across the country, because we're looking at voting records and we're seeing how often someone's been a voter. We want to make sure that everybody, no matter what race, what faith, what socioeconomic status, what employment status they're in, they're able to use their voice to get their vote out. And so we're writing to everybody.
So it's really good for all of us.
Yes.
And not just your movement, but for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that everyone has a voice for sure. All right. I wanted to move on to something a little bit different. Now, in terms of misconceptions or maybe even just in terms of what people's image is of the Reform movement, it seems to me that the amount of Hebrew, let's say, in a service, for example, has increased over time.
Yes.
Is that a true observation?
I would say that's a true observation. And, there might be still pockets where the old Union prayer book is the beloved prayer book of the community, but you can see it actually if you just took and I didn't bring props to this,
Yeah.
but if I did, I would have three different prayer books in front. The Union Prayer Book, which almost had no Hebrew. Then the prayer book that became very popular in the 70s and 80s had Hebrew and English and had various choices. And then actually Mishkan Tefillah, which is the prayer book that came out in the beginnings of the 21st century, you would see a lot more Hebrew, but also you now see transliteration, which I actually think was an embrace of the use of Hebrew. So whereas the prayer book that was popular in the 70s, 80s, and 90s didn't have any transliteration, it was like either you knew the Hebrew or you just didn't, and you didn't participate, and you found your way in it. But what was decided with Mishkan Tefillah, which is the prayer book that's most common now in most Reform congregations, is having transliteration aside by it for those who don't know Hebrew, but actually want to have the beautiful sacred language of Hebrew come off their tongue, even if they're not able to actually read the language. And so, yes, I mean, you will. There's still some people who from outside our movement who sometimes don't love all the English we do have, or that still feels very foreign. I will say, as somebody who did not grow up in the Reform movement, so I grew up first at at an Orthodox synagogue and then at a conservative synagogue in my childhood. The English was strange for me at first, but then I grew to love it. But I think those who only grew up with the English, you can see a significant difference
Mhm.
over the decades.
We share that similar background,
Mm.
Orthodox conservative.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I know what you're saying. In like hearing an organ, those kinds of things
Yes.
were very kind of foreign to me. How do you think you're addressing some of the threats to the future of Reform Judaism at this point?
Ooh.
Like, how are you kind of thinking forward and, making sure that you are ready for the next phase? Are
Wow, that's a great question. So I want to say two things. One, the question about threats to the reform movement. I think I want to start also just by naming, like, I think there are threats to Judaism.
yeah.
And I think actually we have more in common with other denominations than we do in terms of differences. And I can't mention the threats without talking about the growing anti-Semitism globally, the growing anti-Semitism in the United States and Canada. And I don't, anti-Semites don't care. Whether, one of us is wearing a talit, one of us is wearing tefillin, one of us is covering our head, like they don't care. Um, I do think that actually our Orthodox brothers and sisters are more vulnerable externally in some ways because sometimes externally, right, it's easier to sometimes see an ultra-Orthodox or a Hasidic Jew than to see me. I might have the name Esther, I might wear a Star of David, but it's maybe harder to tell that I'm Jewish, but I think we're all facing that threat. So that's one. I also think we're all equally facing the threats to democracy particularly in the United States. Democracy has not been on an upswing across the globe, and I think that actually hurts all of us, all Jews. And I would also say that what's happening in Israel, with Iran, in Gaza, is also a threat to all of us, whether we're reform or not. So I actually worry much more about the threats that are communal than are specific to my denomination. Um, if I was pushed on a threat to reform Judaism, I would say potentially the threat, and it's probably too strong a word, threat in this case, but um, I would say it's internal, which is, do our children know what our values are? Are we doing a good enough job raising them in a serious yet joyful Jewish community? One that is rooted in text and history, but still, and gives history a voice, but not a veto, to quote Mordecai Kaplan. Um, and so I think the threats are more about what we are doing than what's going to happen to us. And that's also, I will say, a little bit begins to answer the second part of your question, which is how do we face the future? So there are those of us, I've studied a lot with futurists who say that either you think of some of us think of the future as something that happens to us, and some of us think of the future as something we have agency in bringing about. And I tend to land much more. I think we need both. Frankly, the folks who are worried about the future happening to us, I think, are sometimes the ones who are sounding the alarm bells. right, louder than others. So I value that perspective. But I think that we also need the people who say, I have agency over the future. And therefore, I think the way to do that is actually build certain muscles, resilient muscles for sure, but also build muscles of curiosity, of imagination, making sure we're in intergenerational relationships. I don't want a Judaism that just me and my peers have built. I want to know, I'm curious what Gen Z, what the next generation, the alphas, which I think are what my kids' ages are, and how they understand their lives and how Judaism fits into that. And I think that will help us actually be a more resilient, forward-facing community if we can learn to not get too rooted in nostalgia. Maybe take the feeling we have. I'm nostalgic about a lot of things, but I don't want to stay in the past. I want the feelings I have about the past to inform my present and my future. So if we can build some of that, I think we'll be more than great.
Do you have a mechanism within the organization for listening, for hearing feedback, kind of like a suggestion box that kind of gives you a sense of what is going on within the 2 million people that is out there? Like, are there ways that you get feedback?
Yes, I'm going to answer that in two different ways. One that's more built in to the way I think our leaders, myself, the people I work with work, and then also like at specific times we do have ways of doing this. So I'm going to start with that. Like in the lead up to the World Zionist Congress campaign, which we were a part of, we were thrilled with what we got. We often talk about we're one of the largest Zionist movements in North America. We did what's called listening campaigns, where we go out into communities, people are trained, leaders are trained, rabbis, cantors, educators, lay leaders, and they go out and they listen, particularly when it comes to, especially around something like the World Zionist Congress campaign. And we've done that around that kind of campaign. We've done that around social justice campaign, and we've done that in other ways. So, and that's, the main mechanism, listening, right? Like we always talk about how we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. But I think the other way we do it, and this is a really important way of doing it, and I think it's one of those things that has to be built as a habit. And if we're not doing this, we actually need to get better at this, is how often are we in relationship with people? Like yes, I live in the DC area, I'm on Zoom. But how many times am I using my Zoom to just be in relationship with people? And so even when I have an agenda, like I'm calling somebody to raise money, or I'm calling, because I'm going to be in town and I want to visit with a colleague or a lay leader. The first thing I ask is, how are things going in your community? Tell me what's going on. Tell me what's keeping you up at night, and tell me what's getting you up in the morning. What are you excited about, and what's bringing you down? And I think we need to, I am very proud of the URJ. I believe that we do build that into our staff culture, and we do build that into the culture with our lay leaders. And we have learned to be a relational movement. I'm sure we can improve it. I'm sure we could do better, because I always believe in improvement. But I think that's one of the ways you do it, is recognizing that it's not just about your agenda. It's also about seeing the human in front of you, and understanding they know more about their life than you know about their life. Whether that's, being a temple president in Tulsa, or, living in San Francisco. Anyway, so all of those, that's the real heart of it, is the relationship building.
Right. So one of the things that we like to do in Mitzvah Expo is to let people know how they can get more engaged with the organization that we're talking to. And so what are some ways that people can, and are there, just kind of, since we're thinking toward the end of the show here, are there any other particular things that you want our listeners and viewers to know about the URJ?
Sure. Happy to share some of those pieces. So I'm going to lift up our Every Voice, Every Vote campaign. If you want to know more about that, you don't have to be a member of Reform Synagogue to come or do it. Go to rac.org, rac.org, and you will find information about Every Voice, Every Vote. And you can sign up. There's a lot of different ways one can sign up. If you're more interested in coming to a joyful gathering of Jews from all across the United States, Canada, the globe, and Israel, please join us in Philadelphia in December, sort of 250th anniversary, the sort of tying that in. We'll be engaging 3,000 Jews at our biennial. You can find information on urj.org. The other piece I'll throw out there is we also, for those listeners who might be interested in learning more about Judaism, first of all, I invite you to also check out our Intro to Judaism. We run online programs for those who are interested in learning more about Judaism or converting. Also, you can find on urj.org. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention reformjudaism.org. We have over 1 million unique subscribers and visitors every year. And if you just want to learn more about the way we approach Jewish holidays, Jewish life cycles, you can sign up for our weekly 10 minutes of Torah. So if you want like a snack-sized bite of Torah that relates to your life, you can sign up there at reformjudaism.org.
Right. This sounds like some wonderful ways to get engaged and get involved. For someone who maybe they're thinking about joining the Reform movement in some way, whether they have a local synagogue, or sometimes are there like also some small gatherings that they could kind of test the waters a little bit?
It all depends on what's happening locally, and we are still trying to improve. So you can go onto our website actually and go to our events calendar, and you might be able to find some pieces. We are still trying to improve that mechanism. So I would start there if you're looking for something that's more local. And many of our congregations are also doing things outside the walls of the synagogue. So there are synagogues who have modeled that it's not just about who comes into the building, but also how we go out, we leave the four walls. There are places in San Francisco and Boston and DC and New York and Texas that are doing that kind of work. And I would look for some of those opportunities.
Any final word to our viewers about what you'd like them to know about the URJ?
Is first of all that it's not your parents or grandparents URJ. For those of you who might be familiar with the former version of Reform movement, and I would say that we really are trying to be both a movement that is based in values that speak to where people are today. And I think I'll end with this. We are a movement that wants to platform certain beliefs about God, about Israel and Zionism, but also that's trying to be inclusive of those who may not subscribe to every single one of those platforms, and trying to create spaces where people can feel comfortable in those spaces, even if they're questioning, like, we're a great home, I think, for atheists. And I think we can be a great home for people who maybe don't hold to the title Zionist, but really believe strongly in Jewish peoplehood.
Rabbi Esther Lederman, thank you so much for joining me today on Mitzvah Expo. For those of you who want to find out more about the URJ, again, the website is urj.org. Is that right? Okay,
Yes.
Great. And the URJ also has a showcase page, which we've created on mitzvahexpo.org. So I hope you check it out. And thank you again, Rabbi.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Special thanks to Rabbi Esther L. Lederman, Vice President, Jewish Life and Leadership of the Union for Reform Judaism, for joining me today and sharing the important work of the URJ with our Mitzvah Expo audience. To learn more about the initiatives of the Union for Reform Judaism and about the other organizations featured on the program, visit our showcase pages on mitzvahexpo.org. While you're there, we invite you to join the Mitzvah Expo community so you can stay up to date on future programs, featured organizations, and events. We invite you to also share a mitzvah you've done in your own life or community. Your good deed may inspire others and help highlight the many ways people can make a difference. You can listen to Mitzvah Expo on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and listen or watch on YouTube, and of course at mitzvahexpo.org. If you enjoyed the program, please follow or subscribe so more people can discover the inspiring work happening across the Jewish community. And we'd love to hear from you. Please write to me at rabbilindabernstein@gmail.com with your comments and suggestions for future featured Jewish organizations. Get informed, be inspired. For Mitzvah Expo, I'm Rabbi Linda Bernstein.
You've been listening to Mitzvah Expo. Learn more at mitzvahexpo.org.
Mitzvah Expo is a production of Vita Media Corporation.